Hello, BIS. My name is Dr. Wall. I am the Assistant Superintendent here for the Bolivar District, and I was so excited when Mrs. Goodwin asked me to come over and read a chapter. Today, I'm going to read to you Chapter 30, and the title of that chapter is called The Nest. Grace and Marty came to a stop about 10 feet from the end of the tunnel. In front of them was an open area lit by bright sunlight and scattered with engorged vultures. "I don't think Mokomembe would tolerate vultures," Grace said hopefully. Well, Marty didn't think so either. "Let's go see what's on the menu." They stepped out into a clearing nearly 50 feet across, roughly circular, surrounded by dense trees. Directly across from them was a second opening, identical to the one they had just stepped through. The parrot was picking at the ground. "What is this place?" Marty barely heard her. He was looking at the 40 or so vultures to their left, fighting over the last scraps of what had once been a very large animal. "Mokomembe," he said. This time Grace did not laugh or disagree. There was enough skin and bone left to see what the animal had once been, and it was clear that it was unlike anything they had ever seen before. The skin was the color of green olives, dappled with purple splotches. Its tail was as long as its body, thick at the base, tapering down to a fist-sized nodule at the tip. Its legs were the size and shape of an elephant's, but on the feet, instead of toenails, were 3 large claws. Its neck was nearly as long as the tail, topped by a large skull with 2 rows of sharp teeth that had been exposed by the hungry vultures. Grace shuddered at the memory of what those jaws had done to her mother and Wolf. "Do you think it's the last one?" "It has to be," Marty answered. "You overheard Laurel tell Wolf that the male died, but the female was still alive. This must be her, and she hasn't been dead very long." He took the gizmo out and started taking digital photos. "Wait till Luther sees these photos. He's going to flip." "Marty!" Grace shouted. "Over here!" Grace was on her knees at the far end of the clearing, holding what looked like a deflated soccer ball. "I think it's an egg," she said. "One of the vultures must have dug it up." Marty took it from her. It was nearly torn in two. The shell was leathery and pliable, nothing like the brittle egg Laurel had brought to Kryptos. He turned around and looked at the clearing again. "This must be why Mokomembe attacked your mom and Wolf." "What are you talking about?" "We're standing in the middle of a dinosaur nest. Your parents got too close." Marty began digging in the soft soil. "We've got to see if there are more eggs." "What about Butch?" "I bet you $1 I find an egg before you do." And Grace started digging. Wolf had a bird's eye view of Felipe, stumbling, dropping his shotgun, then collapsing on the ground. Jacques glanced back at his partner for a moment, then continued forward, stopping directly below the tree Wolf had climbed. "Keep going," Wolf pleaded silently. "Don't look up." Jacques looked up, grinned, brought his shotgun to his shoulder, and fell over backward. The shotgun went off, peppering the branches and leaves all around Wolf's perch, but none of the pellets found him. Wolf breathed a sigh of relief and climbed down. He threw Jacques over his shoulder and walked back to where Felipe lay. He had never tranquilized a human before and was a little worried they might have an adverse reaction to the drug, but their pulses and respirations were normal. The men would be out for at least 2 hours before they could walk without any coordination. That would give him plenty of time to reach the sky house. Before he left, he checked the gizmo. Subject: delivery. From phil@ewolf.com to wolf@ewolf.com. Package delivered. We'll be waiting on the tarmac. Good luck, Phil. Wolf smiled. 2 email in as many days. Wolf hated computers, emails, cell phones, 2-way radios, even regular phones, preferring to communicate face-to-face. He wrote him back, then checked the vidcam. Butch had moved about 2 miles from where he had last seen him. He was standing behind a tree, looking at something. Vid flew off and started circling above the trees. A small clearing came into view. "I don't believe it," Marty said. Grace turned around from where she was digging. Cupped in Marty's trembling hands was a perfectly formed white egg. "There are 2 of them," he said, "and you owe me $1." Grace hurried over. He handed her the egg and carefully dug the second egg out. "Do you think they're fertilized?" asked Grace. "Well, it depends on how long ago the male died." "Well, maybe we should put them back." Marty shook his head. "And let the vultures eat them?" "Quark! Quark! Quark!" Vid landed near the carcass. The gizmo rang. Marty set the egg down and answered. "What do you think you're doing?" Wolf shouted. "Butch McCall is less than 200 yards from where you are sitting." Marty had forgotten about Butch in his excitement over finding the eggs. He stuttered. "Hang on." He handed Grace the second egg and pointed the gizmo at their find. "Where are you?" Wolf asked in awe. Marty turned the gizmo back on himself. "We're sitting in the middle of Mokelmembe's nest." Wolf stared at him in silence as he went over the possibilities and decided what had to be done. "Do a 360 with the gizmo," he said. "I need to see where you are." Marty stood and turned in a very slow circle. "Hold it," Wolf said. "What's that?" "Mokelmembe," Marty said, "or at least what's left of her. I took a bunch of photos down and downloaded them to the cyber vault." Wolf stared at the carcass. It had taken Rose and him nearly 2 years to find Mokelmembe, and they never did find the nest. Grace and Marty had found it in a matter of days. "How did you find it?" "Well, a little bird told us," and Marty pointed to the gizmo up at the parrot. "His name's Congo," Wolf explained. "Rose, Grace's mother, named him. He adopted us the day we arrived at Lake Tele. They were inseparable. I'm surprised he's still around after all these years." And he shook off the sad memories. "Continue panning." Marty completed the circle. "What do you think?" "2 entrances," Wolf said. "Which one did you come through?" Marty told him about the blocked tunnel. "You'll have to go back through the same one. Butch is waiting for you outside the second entrance. At least he was a moment ago. Well, the picture on Marty's gizmo went blank, but he could still hear Wolf. "The battery's going," he said hurriedly. "Before you leave, I want you to set Mokelmembe on fire." "You're kidding." "Do you have matches? Maybe some kind of fuel?" Marty felt in his pockets and found the matches he had put in there the night they arrived at the Sky House. "Yeah, but I don't understand why." "Mokelmembe's DNA," Wolf said. "She has to be destroyed so that the Blackwood doesn't get his hands on it. As soon as you set the fire, get out of there. Go directly to the Sky House. I mean it, Marty. No side trips. When you get there, bolt the trapdoors from the inside." "What about the eggs?" "We'll take them with you. Be careful with them, but remember, they're not nearly as important as you and Grace. If they slow you down, destroy them." "Bertha?" The gizmo went dead. Marty looked at Grace. "Bertha?" Grace shrugged her shoulders. "Do you want to torch a dinosaur or pack eggs?" Marty asked. "I'll pack the eggs." Butch was beginning to wonder if he made a mistake by waiting outside the second entrance for the kids. It was the most direct route to the Sky House, but they rarely took the most direct route anywhere. "Quark! Quark! Quark!" The raven came flying through the opening, followed by half a dozen hopping vultures, too heavy with food to fly. Butch stepped out from behind the tree, expecting the kids to come out next. Instead, a gray parrot flew out, followed by a cloud of smoke, the same color as its feathers. "Hurry!" Marty shouted. "Smoke's coming up behind us!" Marty's head was bumping into the bottom of Grace's boots. "I'm going as fast as I can," she said. They had reached the end of the tunnel and were crawling out the same way they had came in. Before Marty had lit the dinosaur, Grace put the eggs into the pack, cushioning them with moss and monkeys so they wouldn't be damaged. The only problem now was that the pack was 3 times larger than it had been. It was like pushing a beach ball through a thorn hedge. "If you hadn't used the camp stove fuel on the dinosaur, we might have had more time to get through," Grace said. "If you had let me use your moleskin to light the fire, I wouldn't have had to use the fuel," Marty said, although he probably would have had to use the fuel anyway. Marty always enjoyed a good fire. He had covered Molcomembes with branches and moss, but it wasn't dry enough to light with a match. Grace had emptied the pack to make room for the eggs and discovered the fuel, which Marty had liberally applied to the carcass. When he dropped the match, Molcomembe didn't light. It exploded. Marty was blown backward. His hair and eyebrows were singed, which was nothing compared to what had happened to the handful of vultures that had refused to give up control of the carcass. 2 of them lit up like torches. The others fled down the nearest tunnel. Grace had stopped again. Marty twisted around to see behind. All he could see was smoke. "At least I have the satisfaction of knowing Blackwood isn't going to get his hands on Molcomembe," he thought, "unless he likes his DNA charbroiled." A vulture came up behind him and pecked at his sneaker. "We're not on the menu yet," and he kicked it away. "If you don't get moving, Grace, those eggs are going to be poached, and so are we." "I'm almost there," Grace said, "just a few more feet." They stumbled out of the vines, coughing, followed by several vultures with smoking feathers. While Grace scooped water from the stream to wet her parched throat, Marty checked the eggs, which seemed to have survived their smoky crawl. Grace joined him. "Where's Vid and Congo?" Marty asked. "They flew off when you blew up the dinosaur." "I didn't blow it up." Grace smiled. "You know, you look better without eyebrows." Butch had to wait for the smoke to clear before entering the tunnel. What he found in the scorched clearing made him very angry. There was only one reason the kids would burn Molcomembe. Dr. Travis Wolfe, which meant that Felipe and Jacques had failed to get rid of him. He tried them on the 2-way, but there was still no answer. There was just enough left of the beast to figure out what it had been, but not enough to collect usable DNA. He walked around the clearing and came to the spot where Grace and Marty had been digging. What were they looking for? A flash of white caught his eye. He stooped down and picked it up. Eggs. They were looking for eggs. And by the look of this ground, they might have found 1 or 2. Wolf stopped in the middle of the land bridge and threw one of the shotguns into the murky water. He looked at the ground and saw Laurel's tiny boot print, which reminded him of Rose's. He thought about Grace and Marty. When he had brought them to Kryptos to live with him, he had no idea how challenging it would be. "I forgot what I was like at their age," he thought. What his sister Sylvia was like, too. Wild. We all have that wolf blood running in our veins, drawing us to risk like a moth to flame. If these first few weeks are any indication of what it's going to be like for the next several years, things are going to be very interesting for me. He could still hardly believe they had found Molcomembe's nest and 2 eggs. Until Laurel had shown up at Kryptos, he was convinced the beast was gone, extinguished forever, at his and Masalito's hands. In the past 11 years, not a day had gone by when he hadn't relived, second by second, the 2 minutes it had taken to kill Molcomembe. Could he have done something different? Could he have saved Rose? Could he have saved Molcomembe? Those 2 terrible minutes were the driving force behind his search for other cryptids. But now Grace and Marty had the eggs, the last deposits of prehistory, and perhaps, more important, a way for him to look forward instead of backward. His reverie was interrupted by the sound of branches crackling. He stopped and listened, relieved when he realized the sound was coming from in front of him and not behind, where he had left Felipe and Jacques. A moment later, Laurel and Masalito broke through the brush to his left. "We heard shots," Laurel said, out of breath. Wolf put his hand on Masalito's shoulder. "It's good to see you, old friend." Masalito looked at Wolf's leg and grinned. The juice Masalito had given Marty had lost its potency, and the insects were attacking him with renewed vigor. He looked back at Grace. The parrot had found them again and was sitting on her shoulder. "I was just thinking of that delicious omelet you made yesterday," she said. "Is there any more of that canned chicken left at the Sky House?" "The place is crawling with it," Marty mumbled. Grace caught up to him. "What did you say?" "I said that if I don't get something to eat soon, I'm going to have to take one of these eggs I'm hauling and fry it." "How far are we from the Sky House?" "We'll be there soon." "Do you have Grace?" Noah Blackwood asked. "Not yet," Butch said. "We'll be there in less than half an hour," Blackwood said, raising his voice. "What's going on there, Butch?" "Mokel Mimbi's eggs." There was a long pause, followed by a much calmer voice. "How many eggs?" "I don't know." "So you don't have them?" "No, but I will have them by the time you get here." "Are the eggs viable?" Butch thought about the broken egg he had found in the nest. "There's a good possibility." "And Moke Mimbe?" "Dead." "You saw it?" "What was left of it." "Any recoverable DNA?" "Not a chance." Butch took his map out as he walked. "I've got an alternate landing spot for you. It will be tight, but I think the pilot can put it down there." He gave Blackwood's the coordinates. "What about Wolf and Dr. Lee?" Blackwood asked. Butch had just tried again to reach Felipe and Jacques on the radio without success, which could not be good. "I have to go." Butch hung up and quickened his pace. Thank you, boys and girls. I really enjoyed reading this chapter. Tune in tomorrow. It's getting very interesting. Have a good day.